Well, hello, my name is Mike Allen, and I'm kind of the instigator behind this documentary project I want to tell you about today. It's a music documentary, and it's really focused on the decade of the 80s in North Carolina, in Chapel Hill and Winston-Salem and Raleigh and Charlotte. The name of the documentary is Bring It On Home. And how it kind of got started was back in 2004, I was sitting around with some friends of mine who we went to UNC, and we were kind of remembering, the music there during that decade and how we would go out, during the week, on the weekends, and you could really go out and see a great band every night at the Cat's Cradle at Rhythm Alley. In fact, this is the Cat's Cradle we're in today, which is very fitting. But we would go out and there were so many bands in this area. Arrogance, there was the Fabulous Knobs, which later became the Woods, there was Don Dixon, there was Robert Kirkland, Kick the Future, Dexter, Ron Weber, and the Flat Duo Jets. Over in Winston-Salem, you had Mitch Easter and Let's Active, you had the Right Profile. I mean, I could just go on for days and days, but there was just so much, and it was at a time in the country where the same kind of things was happening in Athens, Georgia, and Minneapolis and Austin, but there was this do-it-yourself kind of feel to the bands here. They wrote their own music, they produced and recorded their own music, so it was a vibrant time to be around.
Was the first band out of what was then a very, very sort of unprepossessing scene to concentrate on original music. They did from the very beginning, and they concentrated on that. They also concentrated on producing their own demos and records eventually. They concentrated on doing pretty much everything for themselves and doing it in a very intelligent way.
No one's ever really captured that decade on film. No one's done a proper documentary of it. So we just, on a whim, started doing this. And so for the past 8 years, I've been tracking these guys down in these bands and sitting down with them and recording them, interviewing them, shooting live performances. People that really kind of defined not just my college years, but all the way up until now, I still listen to these guys, and they influenced. The influence they had just reached all over the country. It reached to Athens. REM was influenced by a lot of these guys, by Mitch and Don, and so it was a far-reaching influence, and we wanted to capture some of that. These guys meant so much to so many.
Well, I think we began in 1984. The Flat Duo Jets began in 1984, and we started in my mom's garage, and the Kamikazes had long since ended. And me and Crow were just sitting around one day, and we went to go play music, and all the equipment was already in there like it is in here. And literally from the first note, we knew we had something really special. And I think the first song we played was an old country song called Born to Lose. And from there, we quickly established gigs, and Josh Greer had Dolphin Records. And he heard us live, and he really dug us, so he put out our first cassette on Dolphin Records, which was #1 in the record bar for a month.
I met REM by way of Peter Holzapfel recommending my studio to them. So that's what they did. They came to me and recorded something. When they showed up at the house, I realized that their manager at the time, Jefferson Holt, was the guy I'd seen around here, because he was from Burlington. I'd seen him in clubs and stuff. So we did this weekend thing. We did Radio Free Europe and a couple other songs. And that was pretty fun. And then they'd found the studio in Atlanta a few months later they wanted to work at, and I really enjoyed that session, so I hope to get to do a little bit more with them. So for the one and only time in my career, I think, where I really kind of tried to talk somebody into coming in the studio, I ran into Jefferson again and really urged them to come back to me to do some more stuff. So they did, and ended up being the Chronic Town EP.
In 1995, David Manconi, who's the music critic for the News and Observer in Raleigh, did this really neat chart. And it kind of shows how all the bands, not only from that decade, but even into now, are kind of related. They all have a lot of crossover. It's called the North Carolina Music Galaxy, the Big Bang Theory, and it really does show, again, this was in 1995, so it's certainly grown since then, but this kind of shows the interrelationships between all the bands in this area. Sneakers in Winston-Salem, spawned the DBs. Let's Active was certainly around there at that time. Mitch Easter played in Sneakers with Chris Tamey. The DBs, of course, who went on to New York and became a very influential musical group for a lot of people, of course. And this Arrogance and Fabulous Knobs, which they toured together, and some of the Terry and Jack and David played with Don and Marty later on. And then the Pressure Boys, which they were kind of the original ska band from Chapel Hill, and they were fantastic. There was nothing like a Pressure Boys show. And then you move on out to the early 90s, Superchunk. So that's kind of what we're trying to capture on film.
There's a blight on the land, some say, but I don't know. They say the good dirt's blown away and nothing will grow. They said to pack up and leave, find somewhere to go. But I think that I'm gonna stay and watch the wind blow. I'm gonna stay right here and watch the wind blow.
Seeing live North Carolina bands was huge and an influence, because it made me think that I can do this too, or at least I can try to. It was sort of a big leap to actually make that jump, because being a fan who was just learning guitar to doing what they did, they were like gods. Anybody who played with me in the Hanks will affirm that point of view.
Our mission here is to kind of honor those guys and say thanks for not just kind of defining the soundtrack of our college years, but I'm still listening to this music today, and it's still fresh, and it's still vibrant, and it still means something to someone. But there's an entire generation who may not know who these guys are. They may have heard of REM and the B-52s and things like bands like that, but they may not know who the original folks were. The Let's Actives of the world, the Don Dixon and Robert Kirklands, the Mitch Easters, the DBs, Peter Holzapfel and Chris Stamey, who are still going back to releasing new records. So we just want to capture that decade and do it justice.
Praise be to me, babe. I got the feeling again. And everyone for the last time.
Early 80s, the community here was very self-supporting. Everybody knew everybody. When you played your gig, you would look at the audience. Yeah, it was full of your fans, but it was also full of a lot of your peers. Like people you knew and other bands and stuff would come see you, see what you were working on, and they would talk to you about your songs later.
Looking back at the wealth of talent that I was around, the Mitches and the Chris's and the Dons and the Greers and the Sam Mosses and the people like that, it's just phenomenal to me. That I've always been in the company of greatness.
The Right Profile was very much coming from the same place as like Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. The band was the big influence. The first question that Steve Dubner, who was at that point the spokesperson for the band, first thing he asked me when I had called him saying, my brother told me you're looking for a drummer. He said, well, what do you think about John Bonham? And I thought it was a trick question, but I wasn't quite sure, and I'm not a huge Led Zeppelin fan, so I just said, he's okay. And he goes, that's close enough. And he said, what do you think of Levon Helm? And oh, he's great. So I got the gist by that point. And he said, oh, that's good.
So, up until this point, I think I have over 100 hours, maybe 110 or 120 hours of footage actually shot. And we're at the point now where it moves into the finishing stage, which means editorial and color correct and audio mixing and getting it ready for distribution or handing out or film festivals or screenings and whatnot. So that's why I'm here today, really, is to appeal to you to maybe help us with that part. These are the expenses that we don't have, the out-of-pocket stuff. We can donate our time, we can donate our energies, and the bands can, sit for interviews, but it's finishing the project out that is requiring the largest amount of money. And, the other thing is that these bands are still playing today, but they have families to raise, and they all have other jobs and stuff, but they love music so much, and it's still very close to my heart, and all these bands are still very close to my heart. So I want to give them something back, and that's really the only reason we ever started this, was it just a labor of love. No amount is too small, $1, $5, $10, whatever you feel like giving. And if you look over to the side of the website here, we've got some really cool things to give in return. All the way up through an executive producer title, which looks great on IMDb. So please give if you find it in your heart. Thanks.
I didn't want it to be so suddenly. It happened so suddenly.